Reverend Jack Conrad is making the early morning rounds of cancer patients at Methodist Hospital in Germantown. Sometimes there's good news of someone going home. Sometimes sad news of a patient with only days left to live. Reverend Conrad visits with some of the patients, giving them a smile, some words of encouragement, and a blessing. His gentle manner and calming voice don't seem to fit with a man who, for 35 years, was a corporate executive in the manufacturing industry. How did he go from making railroad parts to making people comfortable in their last hours on earth?
It was Labor Day about 3.5 years ago, and I was building a swing set / fort for my grandkids here in Memphis. My wife came out with my 2 youngest grandsons and my new puppy, and they got laughing and playing and giggling. And I heard something in my heart just say, why do you want to miss this? We lived up in Louisville, Kentucky at the time. And so on the way back up, I told my wife, I said, let's build a home down here. I had had 35 years I was tired of business. And I was really tired of the aspect of the way in which corporations treat people. There's things I don't particularly care for. And I had experienced too many of those things over my career. So probably if in the depth of the honesty, there was something that I wanted to change. And so as it turned out, I looked and chaplaincy found me. And I never even thought about being a chaplain, never did.
Jack Conrad's journey to his second career was different than most. His was a calling, something he felt with his heart. But the wisdom he's gained from reinventing his life can be valuable to anyone who's arrived at one of life's crossroads.
I've had so many friends that have been devastated by loss of jobs. And it's not uncommon for guys in their 50s to wind up going, now what am I going to do with myself? Because you come to that particular point where you're making a reasonable salary, and if they let you go, then that's a good thing for the corporation, and on and on and on. And this is not an uncommon type of a scenario. Certainly a little bit different in my particular case because I had a calling to something else. But I've learned the lessons that I'm not defined by what I do. I'm defined by who I am. Every last one of us, looking at our particular status, will think that if we had more, we'd be better off, and that's just not true. Who we are makes a much more difference than what we think we have. It's not security against death. It's not security that life is going to be fair. It just isn't. But if we're secure in who we are, and we can imagine ourselves doing different things, oh Lord, what a great place this would be.
Jack has started a third career as an author. He's published Living Before Dying, a collection of stories and reflections from his time as a hospice chaplain.
The doctor comes in to you and says, I'm sorry, Cris, but you got about 6 months. I mean, after you get past the shock, which is always comes, you get to decide what to do with that 6 months. And I've watched people decide to live a full life for 6 months. And I've watched people decide to die that day.
This is a certification class for hospice volunteers. Jack is one of the teachers. And much of what he communicates to the students comes from the pages of his book. Stories, like the one about a World War II veteran of the Battle of the Bulge, haunted by one horrible moment in a horrific war.
And at that particular time at the Battle of the Bulge, what they would do is the Germans would parachute soldiers that spoke perfect English, perfect American, in American uniforms, and then they would direct units into ambushes. And they were despised and hated by the GIs at the time. And his colonel called him over and said, we just caught 7 of those Germans that were doing that. And he says, yes, I know. And he says, they never came through this camp. He says, what do you mean they never came through the camp? He says, there's no records. There'll be nothing. This little man, tears were streaming down his eyes at that time. And he said, Chaplain, they took him over into a field, and I must have heard 100 rounds of ammo go off. And I heard screams and yells. And I did nothing. And he started to sob. He just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. This little man had borne that for 50 years. That sorrow, that sad, that feeling responsible in some sense, some way, for a human life being taken amongst a horrific situation in the Battle of the Bulge, and that was just a horrific battle. But he felt still responsible, and he had to let that go. And he died the next week. But I think, and I'd like to believe, that he died at peace.
Reverend Jack Conrad lives with death every day. But between the moments of sadness and sorrow, he finds the inspiration that guides his life, and his words are wisdom for us all.
I want to live life, I want to feel it, I want to taste it, I want to experience it in all the glory that God's given it, and never take anything for granted.